how different is what was going on then versus now? Because so for me, I watched two documentaries. I watched Ukraine on Fire. I watched Winter on Fire. So Winter on Fire was the one Sean Penn talks about.
Ukraine on Fire.
Yours is Ukraine on Fire. There's another one that says Winter on Fire. And so I watched both of them because I want to kind of get a feel. Winter on Fire is more about the students, the revolution. Hey, Victor agreed. Yes, we're going to sign the EU agreement. We're going to go with them. Everything's going to work out. Overnight, he says, no, I'm going to go to Russia. So the students revolt and they're, all those scenes. It's very emotional. It's tough to watch, but you watch that. So then I go and watch yours because Winter on Fire doesn't tell the history of Ukraine. It doesn't tell the history of what Stefan Bandera did. You know who he was and how 80,000 Ukrainian soldiers represented and fought for Hitler, and then they put him in jail, and then the two victors battling and the role Russia played. It was a very interesting way of seeing Ukraine on fire. What did you learn about Ukraine and Russia when you did the documentary Ukraine on Fire? Because we're in it right now. We're in the thick of things
also,
right
you
now.
have there's antecedents here. Among other things, you should go back to World War II, and you should understand that there's a split in the Ukraine, and that half of Ukraine is Russian-speaking, the other half is anti-Russian, strongly so. Stephen Bandera and people like that were working with the Nazis. Many groups. The Ukrainians were hunting Jews in Ukraine and in Poland. There was a lot of killing going on. It was a dirty, bloody war. So much stuff happened. So you have all these people. They never went away. They're still there in the Ukraine. If you look at the Maidan moment, and you look at our film, you'll see very clearly the neo-Nazis are back. The Azov Battalion, the Aidar Battalion, the Right Sector Party, and you see them on camera, and they're very rough customers, these people. They're not about to be, they don't believe in democracy. They don't there was a lot of students and a lot of honest people at Maidan, and there was a lot of frustration with the corruption in Ukraine. But we go into the whole history of that relationship of the president with the EU. He tried to make a deal with the EU. He had a better economic deal from Russia. That's the reason he stayed. He didn't sign on to the EU deal. Very important to recognize that. He wanted to postpone it until he got a better deal, and that makes sense too. When all this was happening in Maidan, he even offered to have an earlier election. He offered it. He said, if you want to, you want to get rid of me, it's not democratic, but we'll go with an earlier election. And they actually accepted it, but then these thugs who are operating behind the scenes at Maidan, very organized, by the way, very organized. And I think the CIA plays another role there because CIA has been involved with Ukrainian Nazis since World War II. We got a lot of them out to our country on the rat lines, and we came back after World War II in '48. There was an operation by the CIA to drop these people into Ukraine to make trouble, to start troubles for Russia. It's an old story. It's not new. This is.
But I don't think a lot of people know it, though.
Well, it's a fact. In fact, the guy I worked with on JFK, Fletcher Prouty, was a colonel who was in the World War II and Air Force, and he was one of those guys who supplies these infiltrators to the Ukraine with weapons and with flights, and you have to drop them and so forth and so on. It's a lot of hardware. All these guys were picked up, by the way. That's what's amazing. It's like with Castro. Whenever we go up against Castro, he seems to find out the people we send in secretly. It's an interesting side effect. But the Russians the Russian Ukraine picked up these people. But we tried to destroy Russia.
Is your phone on by any chance? Do you know if your phone is on? Because someone's ring is going on.
Oh, I'm doing this, you mean?
I know. Is your phone on? Do you have your phone with you? Maybe it's your phone going off because someone's phone's going off.
I have it with me, but I...
Check to see if maybe it's going off.
Okay.
Just the ringtone.
No, nothing's ringing.
Okay, sounds good. So
it's off.
So now if we watch TV today and we turn it on, you're seeing Zelensky that is standing and he's looking pretty strong and tough, and he's not reacting. And the news is telling us that Russia's lost 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers in the last few weeks, which is more than what we lost in Iraq. And the two foreign ministers had a conversation together 2-3 days ago. It was an hour-and-a-half conversation in Turkey. Nothing, no advancements really made. how different is Ukraine's story today versus when you did the documentary? How much has changed? Because Zelensky is not in your documentary when you did it, right? So is it night and day different story today? Are they making more progress?
I did it. We did. No, it's not me who did it. The director was Igor Lapatonik, who was Ukrainian, Russian Ukrainian, and he did it. I was an interviewer and one of the producers. So these two films, Ukraine on Fire, and the other one is called Ukraine Revealed. Revealed goes into the present moment with Zelensky there. It's a very interesting documentary about the opposition candidate, Viktor Medvedchuk, revealing Ukraine. That's it. Robert Parry, who was one of the great journalists in our country, who was the most eloquent about Ukraine and saw this coming. He was talking about a nuclear conflict back in 2014 when this thing went down. He saw it coming. He died in 2015. It's a great loss to American journalism. He was the truth teller. This story today is so passionate and so complicated. All the news in America, unfortunately, is one-sided. You don't get anything from the other side. There's no, and they banned RT and they banned right. They had a very concerted campaign to cut off what they call Russian disinformation. Is perhaps the best information we can get from what's really going on. And frankly, I don't have all the details. I do hear the other side because I read alternate media, which is to say what's available on the internet. They're not going to be able to kill off all that because there are a lot of American journalists who are aware of this and writing about it. There are people who actually been in Donbass and can tell you that from 2014 to now, Donbass has been victimized by the Ukrainian army, and especially by the neo-Nazi gangs. They're the ones who've been dropping the artillery, killing people. It's been bloody, and it's hard. There's estimated 16,000 dead, most of them on the Russian side, most of them Donbass people, okay? And that is never dealt with. You don't hear about it in the U.S. media.
Can you pull up Donbass on the map?
And
I'd like to
by
get
the
an
way,
idea
a lot of them
where
have
that is.
immigrated because of the bombings. They immigrated to Russia across the border, and you don't hear about that. You'll hear about refugees only going to the other side from this war. I don't think it's listen. I don't know what Putin had. Putin was squeezed. He was provoked into this thing, and that's the truth. The United States has using Ukraine as a proxy to put pressure. U.S. doesn't care about Ukraine. They care about Russia. This is a chance to destabilize Russia, remove the leader, regime change once again on a big way. This is a big victory for them if they can pull it off. And this was always the goal from the beginning. I don't think there's any concern about the Ukrainian people, except as a sentimental thing in the newspapers. Well, this person was killed, that person was killed. But what about the people who were killed on the other side? They never mentioned them for 5-6 years. No, more than that, 8 years. Those people were killed too. Families were killed.
You know, it's crazy what you're saying. So let me give you a different perspective from my life. So when I lived in Iran, if you turn on the news in Iran, we had 2 channels. Every president in Iran and U.S. was the enemy. You heard death upon America. You heard about how big of an enemy everybody was, except for people in Iran. So we were naive. We thought Khomeini was the greatest thing since sliced bread. We thought Khomeini, Imam, Khamenei, these guys were all right, and the Shah was horrible. The Shah was a horrible person in Iran. I mean, if you said anything good about the Shah in Iran, you're a bad person, right? So then you come to, we go live in Germany. And you watch Sat.1 in Germany. Okay, Sat.1 is like their NBC, let's just say, right? And you're watching Sat.1. And you're saying who they paint as being a bad person, right? And they're painting the picture of who's what, right? Then you come to the States, you turn on the news, and you hear who the enemy is, right here. You know, and then eventually you got to get to a point that either you're going to follow the masses, and if they're believing what they're believing, you got to question some of it, right? So U.S., Carter, what they did, which was seems like very interesting strategy that they're currently using here as well. This is a very easy playbook to use. Is they used Khomeini, who was in France, a way to get the Shah to be out. So Carter goes to Iran, has a nice little dinner with the Shah, December 31st, 77. They do a toast, gives a toast, leaves. Revolution happens right off the bat. I'm born in 78, October 18th. Kissinger keeps saying, we're going to help you, we're going to help you, we're going to help you, we're going to help you. Then the last thing they tell him is, we'll help to take you out. And he leaves in January, February something, 2nd, Khomeini takes over, and then Iran, right away, there's a war between Iraq now. U.S. doesn't get, then there's, so.
Well, we do get involved.
Well, we do get involved with the point, and then who makes money? The military-industrial complex, all these Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. But the point is that there is rarely a way to know the whole story. You just said something right now that the audience is going to sit there and say, wait, U.S. is using Ukraine as a proxy to get to Putin to remove him because now the whole world hates that guy, they want to move him. Okay, what was your experience like when you did your interview with Putin?
I'll tell you in a second, but just to make one more point about Iran, to me the whole thing devolves back to 1953 when they got the CIA and British intelligence got rid of Mossadegh. He was the democratic choice for prime minister. He was very popular among most people in Iran, and he would have won, and he would have kept going. And he nationalized, after a lot of provocation, he nationalized the oil interests, the British oil interests, particularly in Iran. That was that was the signal to get rid of him. So they used CIA, very heavily involved. They paid money to mobs to storm the streets, to create all these distractions, like they did at Maidan, to bring chaos to the country. And then in the chaos, he was called a communist again. He was not a communist because of the two-day party. He did have contacts, but he was not a communist.
He was more like a Bernie Sanders. He was more of a socialist. He was not a communist.
He was a great man. He was a great man.
Yeah.
He was just too trusting. Yeah. He trusted too much, and they got rid of him. They didn't kill him, but they removed him.
Yeah.
And they put the Shah in again. They'd done that before. And the Shah, of course, became more and more of a tyrant, and a lot of torture. I went to the prison there. I saw all the stories of the torture. They're very famous in Iran. A lot of people were scared to open their mouths under the Shah. And of course, Khomeini comes in. He was not the people's choice. He was definitely a counter. He was, because of the extremism of the Shah, you get another extreme reaction to that. That always happens in history. It's very rarely can a moderate emerge in this world. Khomeini was extreme, and whatever, the rest of the story. However, Khomeini did have a lot of provocation. We went on the Iran-Iraq side of the war. We supported Iraq at first. We gave them weapons. And then when Reagan wanted help with the Contras in Latin America to defeat the Nicaraguan communists, he gave weapons to Iran, which is to Khomeini's regime. This is amazing. This is 1983, 82, right?
Right after Carter.
Dirty story. I mean, Reagan was basically had done something that the worst American. I mean, it's traitor. It's an act of traitor. I mean, you're supporting the supposed enemy. Nixon in Watergate never did anything close to what Reagan did. Reagan got away with it because he was popular in a sense. He had that smile. He was a good performer. Contragate is one of the most undiscovered scandals in American history. Contragate, if you should really read up on it, because it's a very important scandal. And it comes unglued, and Reagan, in the last 2 years of his life, his presidency was unable to keep his agenda going. In fact, we would have been in a war in Nicaragua. He would have sent troops to Nicaragua. I was down in that region because I was visiting it to make Salvador one of my first movies. I was in that region. I saw all the troops in Honduras. I saw the troops in El Salvador. There was an operation about to happen, and thank God Iran-Contra was blown. Among them was Robert Parry, who blew the story, changed the direction of the country briefly.
All these stories you're saying. North. We heard about this from Oliver North.
Yeah,
he was in all the hearings, looking as a very statesmanlike colonel. That was the portrayal, right?
Oliver North was one of the malefactors. Yes, he was one of Reagan's men, but it goes back to Reagan. He got away with it. North took a fall, how many people resigned in Iran-Contra? Like 6 people. McFarland. There was a whole bunch of people who resigned. I forgot exactly who. Reagan, he basically skated out of there 2 years later.
By the way, all these stories that you're bringing up, which are...
So did George H.W. Bush. Bush was definitely involved in negotiations with the Iranians. he got out too. I mean, this whole thing was buried. And you have to point to the Washington media here. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to finish the story. But
sure.
Washington Post plays a huge role here. Katharine Graham, who was the famous star, Meryl Streep played her in the Post, Miss Hero of America, all that kind of stuff. She buried the story. She did not believe after Watergate, the Post had been involved in Watergate. She said, I don't think America can take a second shock like this. So she killed it. Killed the story. There was no coverage.
I was just going to say that all these stories that you're bringing up, which are not easy on the ears if you're obviously pro-American, the one visualization that I'm having is the whole scene from Trump's interview in 2016 where he famously says, oh, you think we're that innocent too? What was the one thing that he said? Oh, you think that we don't have blood? Yeah. It's the one honest thing that Trump says you said?
Possibly.
Okay.
But it's true. I mean, essentially, you're going inside the underbelly of America, the CIA, and what's happening in the Oval Office, and these secret conversations, and you're shining a light on them, and it's not so pretty. Even if you love America, it's hard to digest.
But I love America, and I can take this. I can take the dirt. I think that's what we have to do. We have to be truthful, and we can be better people. We can treat other people with respect and understand our limitations as well. Why do we have to be top dog is a big question.
Well, that's American exceptionalism, right? I mean, that's the concept of capitalism. There's competition. That's in the core DNA that we have here. This is why America has 40 million immigrants, that they want to come here and have an equal opportunity to compete in the marketplace. And if you can build a great life for yourself. But you can't have a capitalistic society and then ask people, why are we so competitive to be number one? It's like if you play for the Yankees don't start the season saying, guys, listen, let's just play the game. Forget about going to play. Who cares about the playoffs? Let's just win to play the game. That's not Yankees' nature. Yankees are starting a season to say, let's crush everybody and win the World Series. That's the DNA
what the
of the league.
tried to do.
The Dodgers try to do that. The Yankees, a lot of these guys.
So if you enjoyed this little segment from the podcast, click over here to watch the entire podcast. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Take care, everybody.